Hello and welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be tackling Final Fantasy XVI's diversity controversy, and what we're actually going to be doing here is deconstructing a modern subtle hit piece, and we're going to be looking for the subtle manipulation that takes place. We're going to be showing you how the straw man arguments are injected, and we're going to cover all of this right now. So without further ado, let's get into this. With the release of Final Fantasy XVI now less than a year away, the developers are revealing more about the game and its world. The recent story trailer for Final Fantasy XVI gave players more of a look into the world of Valisthea and the different countries caught in this fantastical struggle for power. From what people have seen, it is a world very much inspired by Western European fantasy. Remember those words. Much like the Final Fantasy games set in Avalis. Okay, so they've done this before. Final Fantasy XVI is going to have a setting similar to Games of Thrones, but its approach to fantasy has raised some questions about, of course, my diversity and my representation. Aiden Cooper here, who have to question, of course, the diversity and representation, because honestly, it's all they fucking see in the world. It's so fucking annoying, but let's get on with this. The producer of Final Fantasy XVI, Naoki Yoshida, recently participated in an interview where he discussed more about the game's world. In the interview, a question was brought up about the diversity amongst the game's characters. In all the trailers for Final Fantasy XVI, the majority of characters are white with seemingly no representation from people of color. And I gotta say, so far that does seem to be true, that most of the characters do seem to be white. And, you know, from the trailers that we've seen, we don't really see people of color. Now, Yoshida's response was an explanation that the setting for Final Fantasy XVI was inspired by, not supposed to be an accurate reflection of anything, but inspired by medieval Europe. Keep that in mind for the future, because you will see how that gets used to imply strawman arguments. So let's continue on. He further explained that such a setting would not be as diverse as the real world, and a more ethnically diverse cast of characters would clash with the game's narrative. Now, he's basically just saying that in our vision for this is inspired by medieval Europe, and there would naturally not have been a lot of people of color, which is historically accurate. That's not to say there wouldn't have been some people of color, but he's not saying that. Notice he did not say that there were no people of color in medieval Europe, which is something that Aiden will try to say later on, but they did not. Now, while the story that Final Fantasy XVI is telling is obviously set in a fantastical world, well, thank you for that little bit of honesty. Much of the world is going to be grounded in reality. Yeah, the reality that, like, there's gravity and that walls exist and buildings exist and stone exists and there's a ground, there's a sky, there's the sun, there's air, there's water, there's trees, there's grass, that kind of reality, even a little bit of the physics reality, but it's not bounded in actual reality because it's a fantasy, it's a video game, okay? We all know that. Catch up, Aiden. The team behind Final Fantasy XVI wants to incorporate the standards of medieval Europe as best they can into Valisthea. That means taking heavy inspiration, not realism, from historical, cultural, political, and anthropological standards. While realism is an admirable goal, whoa, what are you doing, Aiden? When did they set a goal of realism? When did Square Enix and Naoki Yoshida and his team just set a goal of being realistic representation of medieval Europe? Did they say that? Did they do that? Where is that? You haven't presented that evidence. There are other parts of the game that already conflict with Square Enix's realistic standard, and now we see the manipulation. Now we see this way that, well, writers like Aiden suddenly create this straw man argument and say, look, I'm tearing down the straw man, and I'm showing you this is actually not realistic at all, when no one from Square Enix, no one from the development team said this was supposed to be realistic. That is an injected argument by Aiden. The English dub of the game is meant to display Final Fantasy XVI's European inspiration. The decision to primarily use British accents and no American accents in Final Fantasy XVI is one of the design decisions that is supposed to channel the game's medieval European roots. Okay? However, if the team behind Final Fantasy XVI is using a less globalized setting as an excuse for not having an ethnically diverse cast, which seems to be what they're saying, then the British accent seems like a major restriction on a supposedly broad European setting. Okay, well, maybe. I mean, I can kind of see where you're going with this. Europe has a wide variety of languages, accents, and dialects that Square Enix could have tapped into. Yes, absolutely a valid critique. And honestly, in my opinion, after watching the trailer, I kind of understand where Aiden is going with this, and I actually kind of agree. Okay, so you have this world of Valisthea, and you have these kingdoms inside of it, and all of these kingdoms Well, they seem and sound very similar because everybody has a British accent. Now, if they had had one of these kingdoms have a British accent, one of them had a French accent, one of them had a German accent, and a Greek or an Italian accent, or even a Slavic accent, and then you had, of course, the Middle Eastern accent of the Dhalmekian Republic, then I think you kind of would have had a more immersive world. It would have been world building, and it would have kind of added this scope and this this breadth, this depth, this expansiveness to this world. It would have felt maybe much more engaging, and it would have felt more real, in my opinion, if fantasy realism is a thing, right? I'm coining that term right now. Now, the ethnic diversity of medieval Europe should, in theory, extend to Valistea. No, it should not, Aiden. Okay, it should not, because nobody has yet said that this is an accurate reflection of medieval Europe. So why do you think that the ethnic diversity of medieval Europe should extend to Valistea? At the end of the day, Valistea is a creation. It is an artistic expression from the developers, and it doesn't need to look like anything. It doesn't need to sound like anything. While I think having all the accents would add a little more realism or depth to the world building, that's just my opinion, okay? And it doesn't mean that I'm right and the developers are wrong. This is their artistic vision, and it's not up for you or me to tell them how this made-up world that doesn't fucking exist should look or sound. It's up to them. There are a number of environments that should affect how characters look, particularly the Dhalmekian Republic. Final Fantasy XVI's Dhalmekian Republic is set in a mountainous region with vast deserts. Okay, it's basically set in the desert. If you look at the trailer, they say the fortunes of the Dhalmekian Republic shift with the sands. So, and then when you see the architecture, it's distinctly Middle Eastern, right? That's where it's coming from. That was the inspiration for it, okay? So such a region should have people of color present. Granted, if it was a realistic interpretation of that, it was supposed to be realistic to the Middle East, then yeah, it should have people of color. But we've already talked about this, Aiden. It's not supposed to be realistic. It's just inspired by. But the only character from the Dhalmekian Republic is a white guy. And I will say, yeah, he does look like a white guy. I mean, I don't know. Is he a little more or less tan than the other people? Honestly, it's up to you. He does sound just like everybody else. Everybody has the same British accent. So getting back to this, ignoring the fact that there were not many deserts in medieval Europe, another valid point, okay, that there are not many deserts in medieval Europe. A setting like that in Final Fantasy 16 should it? Should include people of color that come from some of those environments in real life. I can understand what he's saying here in that adding some subtle skin tones to the people who clearly come from vastly different areas and different kingdoms, and also adding that slightly different accents might have expanded this world, might have added to that world building. So I understand that point. But when it gets to the point where he's like saying, well, they should have included this or they should have included that, honestly, Aiden, if you could go back in time, would you be telling Leonardo da Vinci how he should have painted the Mona Lisa? Would you have gone back in time and told Monet, no, you're doing this all wrong. The lilies don't actually look like this. What the fuck is wrong with you, dude? You're doing it wrong. Would you have gone up to Salvador Dali and say, dude, that fucking clock doesn't look like that. It's not melting. What the fuck is wrong with you? Do you even know how to fucking paint? I mean, are you even an artist, Aiden? Do you even know what you're fucking talking about? Because it seems like you don't. It seems like you've got an agenda here, and you continue to inject that again and again and again with this whole, this is supposed to be realistic, even though nobody promised that it would be. It is unfortunate that the belief that there were no people of color in medieval Europe is still a prevalent talking point. I mean, who fucking said that, though? Did Naoki Yoshida say that? Did Square Enix say that? Did someone from the development team say that? Because that's what you're implying here, and nobody said that. Okay, now, are there people in the world that believe there were no people of color in medieval Europe? Yes, there probably are. Is that belief unfortunate? Yes, it definitely is. Do you have any proof that Naoki Yoshida, his team, or Square Enix believe that? No, you don't. So again, you're implying a straw man argument with this statement, and it's just a little more subtle manipulation. You know, some people may fall for this bullshit, but I do not. Naoki Yoshida and his team legitimately seem like they wanted to stay true to how medieval Europe was without offending anyone. No. Again, no, they did not want to stay true to anything. They specifically said that they were just taking inspiration from medieval Europe. Again, this isn't realism, this isn't a realistic representation, but it simply isn't accurate to history. You're right. You're absolutely right. This isn't accurate to history. And in fact, let me tell you something, just a little tidbit of information. Guess what, Aiden? There's no magical realm, there's no magical crystals, and there are no magical human animal hybrids that exist and that then pop out of people and start using special powers. It's not real, Aiden. It's fantasy. It's a creation. It's art. And again, who are you to tell them what should or should not be in here? This is their artistic vision. It's never meant to be a realistic representation. So, like, honestly, like the bitch from Frozen, just fucking
Let it go, let it go. Turn away and slam the door.
yikes. Final Fantasy 16 and its world look like they will offer an interesting narrative. Yes, they do. But it is disappointing that there's little representation for people of color in the game. Look, people are going to play this game. If they like Final Fantasy games, if they like that type of game, they're going to play this game. I honestly think that, again, the argument that people are going to play this game because they don't see themselves in the game, well, guess what? Again, what I just stated, there are no magic crystals. There's no magical people who are animal-human hybrids that use those crystals and their powers and special powers to slay magical beasts. Are you telling me that these people need representation? Well, where are those fucking people in the real world? They don't fucking exist. I think I've already made the case. You can see how this guy is injecting his narrative again and again and again. He keeps trying to make this about realism when nobody has said that this is supposed to be a realistic representation of medieval Europe. And honestly, people like this, they're just irritating because they just kind of keep doing this again and again and again. And they do this subtle manipulation with how they write things. So I hope you enjoy this deconstruction of a modern, subtle hit piece. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think of Final Fantasy 16? Look, I think people are going to play it if they like this kind of game. And if they don't, well, then look, nobody's forcing you to. Look, you have freedom. You have the freedom of choice, and you have the freedom to express yourself through your dollars. And if you don't want to express your support for something like this, a project like this, which seems to only show white people, and it's just really making your butt hurt, then don't play it. Don't buy it, don't play it. Isn't that what you will always say? Like, if you don't like it, don't watch it. You remember that little tidbit? So at the end of the day, does that mean that this Final Fantasy 16 is going to go broke because I don't have my diversity and my representation? I actually think it's going to do just fine because I don't think that's actually important to most of the people that play this game. They're not so hung up on that because it's all not real anyways. But we'll see. We'll see. And if, as it turns out, this game does terrible and nobody buys it and nobody wants to play it because it doesn't have my diversity and my representation, then Square Enix will have to pivot and they'll have to take that into account in the future. But I don't think that's going to happen, Aiden. But we shall see. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. In the meantime, if you want to continue to support the channel, then please click on the like, share, and subscribe buttons. We're currently pushing for 1,000 subscribers, closing in on 700. So if you're enjoying the content, then please do subscribe. Another way you can support the channel is through the Patreon. So click on the links in the description below to enjoy exclusive content. That's all I have for now, and I will see you in the next video. Have a great day.